Welcome to Forward Focused. I'm your host, John Reich, and in today's episode, we're actually having a dialogue around financial literacy and leadership and how you can help yourself to then help others at the highest level make wise and efficient decisions with their hard-earned money. Let's dive into it. So before I get into strategies that we can employ as a leader for ourselves, I want to share a quick story of what this kind of was inspired to come to be. I had a coaching client who came to me and we were talking about raises and performances of his team. And one of his team members specifically was hitting metrics, was performing well, but it seemed that any bonus or extra money or profit that this person received never helped them get ahead. Right? Never helped them get ahead of their pain points or financial duress. And they would come to this leader consistently asking for more money, more loans, more time, working extra hours. And so I challenged the leader and I said, it doesn't necessarily sound like this is an income problem. I mean, we can always make more money, right? But this person was making close to six figures. It was more about what they were doing with the money once they had it, right? And so this episode is going to be focused on taking strategies, basic strategies, but some of it more advanced, applying it to yourself as a leader so you can be best prepared to help other people in your world, just like this leader was able to do after coaching with me around their employee. So before we get started into specific strategies and definitions and examples to help us understand how to maximize the income we have coming in and how to build our future, I want to say this. If you have 100% of your money coming in and then you spend 100% of that money, you'll never get ahead. And the way in which I want you to think about this is if 100% comes in, what would it look like to only spend 60 or 70% of that? So if you don't know what that is yet, later on in this episode, there's a resource. I'm going to tell you how to get it from me. It's called a P&L, profit and loss. That's your income coming in and your expenses going out. If you want my free resource, stay tuned because I'll give you a call to action on how to get that from us here at Forward Focus. But keep in mind, the rest of this episode is all about what to do with that extra 30 or 40% once we've saved it. Once we've identified, okay, we have this margin, what can I go do with it? Because remember, all of our decisions, whether it's in finance or just in life, have consequences. Positive and negative consequences. And the goal of this episode is to bring awareness to where we might be today so we can start making more decisions that are more positive with better rewards. I want to start with a hypothetical situation. We have Sarah, John, and Emily. Sarah's 25, John is 30, and Emily's 35. Sarah at 25 years old starts taking $300 a month and assuming an average rate of return of about 7%, she starts investing for retirement. And by the time she's 65 at $300 a month, she has saved $1.2 million, okay? Person two is John. He starts 5 years later at 30 years old. He understands that he's starting later, so he starts putting in $400 a month for retirement. And by the age 65, accumulates $870,000 at the same rate of return of 7%. So I want to point something out there. By putting $100 more of his own money in a month, 5 years later, it's almost $400,000 less than he has for retirement just because he waited the 5 years, even with putting $100 more a month in. Okay, person three, Emily. Emily's 35. She realizes she really needs to get started on this. She realizes she's starting later. So she starts by putting $500 a month aside. And by the time she's 65 years old, has $610,000 with the same 7% rate of return. So I want to point out two things, even if you're not a number person. The person who started at 25 and put $300 a month versus the person at 35 putting $500 a month. Person one, Sarah, at 25 years old, has more than double the money than person three, Emily. Put more money every year, $2,400 more per year for the life of doing this for a 30-year period. This person for 40 years put $300 in a month, $200 less per month, and has nearly double the amount of money. So what that should tell us is that compound interest and time are the two things that are most advantageous really in anything, but in this case, money. So let's talk about some terms because I feel like sometimes This whole idea of money and stocks and bonds and equities and securities and all these different things that are thrown out on CNBC, they can feel a little overwhelming, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. I've said it in different episodes previously. Just start. Starting somewhere will get you closer to the goal than not starting at all. And as I just outlined, time is of the essence. It's your most important asset. So I want to start with a metric here. You'll hear people talk about these. So if you're able to, grab a pen and paper or your iPhone and start taking some notes. If not, save or bookmark this episode for when you can do that, because there's some terms here that I think will be helpful. The first is what cash on cash return is versus return on investment. If I'm in a room with all of you and I say, hey, here is Louis Vuitton heels, right? And they are for sale for $100. Who wants them? I would think everybody's hand in that room would go up, knowing the fact that if they buy that for $100, they could probably sell it for much more, and it'd be a great investment, even if they don't want to wear heels, right? So we understand the concept of a good deal. We understand what an appreciative concept would be. So I'll come back to that in a second. So you have cash on cash return and then return on investment, okay? Cash on cash measures the actual cash invested out of pocket and how much of that comes back annually to me. So if I buy something for $1,000 and in the first year I get $100 back, that'd be a 10% cash on cash return, okay? Whereas return on investment is cumulative. And it looks at not only the amount of money that comes back, but if that asset would appreciate, what the return on that would be. So when you buy a house versus buying a car, your return on investment in a house over a 5-year period is always higher than your average or daily car. The only cars that actually appreciate are collectibles, they're historic cars, or the cars that are super sought after, right? So I just wanted to point out that cash on cash versus return on investment are two different terms that you should be familiar with when you're looking at investing or leading your people to better financial health. My argument on that would be, if we want to buy those new sneakers for $150, if we want to buy the new heels, the new purses, there's nothing wrong with that. But understand that every time you put money into those types of things, you're taking from your future self, where you could be investing for retirement, investing for your children, investing for passive income later, right? Passive income really should be changed to passive income, meaning I did something in the past, I worked for the money, and then instead of spending that money or giving it away, I'm investing it into an asset that starts paying me money on repeat. That's the only way to get ahead. That's the only way to break the cycle of a 9-to-5. And there's different ways that you can do that, and I want to give you some of those now. So the first is you have your basic online savings account, right? So for the last several years, with inflation being as low as it has been, you were getting 0.5%, 0.3%, pretty much nothing on your money. Today, there are so many different online interest savings accounts from a lot of different providers. I use Ally personally, that are paying anywhere from 4 to 5.5% on your money. What that means is for every $100 that you're putting invested in, if it's there for a year, you're going to make $4.5 or $5 interest on that $100. Okay. Now that might not sound like a ton, but 1,000 would be $50. 10,000 would be $500, and you get the idea of how that can start to compound. So online savings accounts are a great way to protect your money. It's insured. It gives you a very low risk, no risk in online savings, and a higher reward. Certificate of deposits is another one. So this is you going to an online bank or a brick and mortar and saying, hey, I don't need this $5,000 right now. I'm looking for a higher return than an online savings account. So they may offer you 6.5% or 6%, but you're not going to touch that money for a year or 9 months or 18 months. They have all different types of terms on your CDs. So what you could do is, if you have a few $1,000s extra, you could break this up over the year and say, I want to have what's called a laddering effect, meaning every 90 days I have a CD that is coming up for renewal, or I can cash out. So if every quarter you went to the bank and deposited $2,000, $1,000, $5,000, whatever your budget can support, then you'll start that clock on a 12-month CD. And every 3 months you start a new CD. So you have 4 CDs after 1 year. And then you can decide, do I want to renew it and continue to build interest, or do I need the cash? I'm going to cash out. So that's how you can take, if I had $20,000 set aside, I wouldn't put all 20 grand into a CD right now. I would take 5 grand 4 separate times and put it into 4 CDs and spread out that cash. Because if you have to divest a CD early, the penalties and the fees would hurt you and take away from your return. Then there's another thing called a money market account. Let's not overcomplicate this. This is a savings account or checking account at a bank that reflects the interest rates that are higher because banks are using that money to loan out to other spots. These accounts have some risk because there's fees and minimums that are attached to it. So you might need to put 20 grand in or $30,000 into a money market account. And if it drops below a certain amount, let's say it drops below $10,000, they're going to hit you with a penalty or a fee. So when you start to get into money market, yes, it's a higher interest, but the more risk is in the fact that the bank is using your money and loaning it out. The bank uses your money and loans it out all the time, by the way. They usually take 10 to 15% of what you deposited. They loan the rest out at a higher rate. That's how they pay you the 4%. So when you come and ask for your $10,000, they're using other people's monies to pay you that, okay? And that's why some banks have it in writing that you need to ask for. If it's over a certain amount of money, you need to ask so many days ahead of time to get that cash. So that's how the whole banking system works. But finishing the money market, the idea behind that is if you can't sustain a minimum amount in that account, it's probably not a good decision because of the fees and other charges that they'll incur to you. There's a credit union, right? So what's the difference between a bank and a credit union? Well, a credit union is a nonprofit typically, and a bank is for profit. Right? So credit unions are nonprofits that are member owned, meaning that everybody that buys into a credit union, they can lower fees, all the members benefit. If there's a surplus in interest or monies that can be returned in higher interest payments back to its members. So really all that means is that credit unions are typically nonprofits, banks are for profits, and in a credit union, it's member owned. So I would recommend having both for different things. Typically, you can get more advantageous car loans, student loans, different loans that you would need to live your life. They can be at a better rate through credit unions because, again, their goal is to drive down cost and share in the profits with the members. Then there's this term called securities, right? And if you're sticking with me so far, I appreciate it because now I'm going to start to give you some tools that you can use too. But this is important, right? We spend more time on building our Netflix sort of algorithm and what we like or don't like than we do looking at our bank accounts, our investment portfolios, and our net worth. And then we wonder why there's too little money in too many days every month, right? So I appreciate you hanging in here because it's important. Securities such as bonds. So this is a fixed income instrument that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower. It's like an IOU, okay? So for example, your local cities, your townships, they actually have what are called municipal bonds, right? And so what that is if they have to raise $3 million to put in a new road, they might have $500,000 or $1 million in their accounts that they'll use. They might get a federal grant or loan from the federal government, and they still have another $1 million they need to raise. So they go to the public and say, hey, minimum buy-in of $500 and you can buy up to $20,000. And they fundraise at this interest rate at a 5-year bond or a 10-year bond or a 20-year bond, right? And so what happens is you put, let's say, $10,000 into bonds and the rate is 5.5%. Fixed. That means for the next 10 years, you're going to make 5.5% on that $10,000 or for whatever the length of the bond is. So the reason why that's important and you want to make decisions around this is because of inflation. The last decade, a 5.5% bond was fantastic because inflation was less than 2%, meaning that your dollar today, a year from now, would be able to buy 98% or 98 cents of what it bought a year ago. That's what 2% inflation looks like. At 10% inflation or 7% inflation, 6%, what we've been going through in 2023 and end of 2022, 5.5%, you're actually losing money still because of inflation. The eggs, the gas, the bread, the cost of living actually has been more than that 5.5% growth. That's what you want to consider when you're looking at investing your income and money. It's a lower risk. There's some years where the stock market goes back 10, 13, 15, 17%. 2022 was one of those years. The stock market took a huge hit. So you really want to have a balanced portfolio is my point. You want to understand what a bond is, what a security is, what an online savings market is, the stock market is. You want to understand what these things are and then make a plan that is best for you and your family. I'm not a financial advisor, but I have a financial advisor. I'm not a CPA, but I have a CPA. And I educate myself on these different terms, these tactics, these strategies, so we can live the life by design that we desire. So I have two additional tools here at Forward Focus. One is a profit and loss statement that looks at income and your expenses, and it sort of tracks what's coming in, and then you can make decisions for your life or business. And the other is a Forma sheet that we've created that looks at 1 year, 2 year, all the way up to 10-year returns on your investment and your cash on cash return for rental properties. If you're interested in both or one of these, shoot me an email at john@getforwardfocus.com and we'll get it into your inbox in the next 24 hours after that email's sent. Why are we spending time at the Forward Focus podcast talking about this content? The reason is that the average millionaire in this country spends 8 hours a month looking at their net worth, looking at their bank statements, their credit card statements, and looking at their assets versus liabilities or debt. I am passionate about helping people build a life by design through their wealth. It's not about money being good or bad. It's about what you do with that money, right? See, if I take a brick and I take that brick and I throw it through a window of a building, the brick's not good or bad. The activity of me throwing that brick is bad. If I take that same brick, though, and I decide to place it as the cornerstone of a new non-for-profit or school, the brick's not good or bad. It's what I did with the brick. Your money's the same way. Being wealthy is not good or bad. Being poor is not good or bad. But the results of being wealthy or poor allow you to impact this world in a very different way. I know that we can do better in this world. I know that we're working as hard as we possibly can. And right now things are expensive. That's why I'm passionate about educating the consumer, educating people around what you can do to live your fullest life. If you aren't spending at least an hour a month looking at your net worth, looking at your income, looking at your credit card statements and bank statements, and getting a grasp of where your money is coming in and where it's going out, start there. Start there. I get messages from time to time where they share with me their successes about how they were able to save their first 10 grand. I had a client just recently show me that he saved his first $100,000 and he was looking to invest it and he was asking me where to go next. I love seeing those success stories. It feels like a lot, and I hear you on that, but just start with something today. So maybe it's getting that P&L sheet from me, or looking at buying your first rental property, or using my Forma sheet to look at your current rental properties to make a decision on what to do next. Whatever it is, we're here to meet you and help you be the best leader you can be in your life and your business. If you follow these different tools, if you look at these definitions and terms, if you create a culture in your workplace where we talk about what we're doing with our money and how we're saving it, investing in our future selves, we can also create a culture of what we're spending it on and what we're giving to charity. And that's my mission with today's podcast, is for us to be a better, fuller version of each of ourselves, having a healthier financial life. If you found value in today's episode, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss a lesson to be the leader that you deserve to be. And until next time, lead on.